I apologize. Okay, so couple things. The layout is a few translations, 5 specifically. We're going to come back to this because the bulk of our work is going to be on our proof completions. Trying to get it all on one line, or on one shot. Proof completions. It's annoying. This should not be so difficult. So proof completions, 1 proof completion, and then 2 proof construction and completion exercises. Now, just do a quick eyeball comparison. 18 lines versus 28 lines, right? You should expect on your actual exam to see the same level of difficulty, in this case, number of lines, or pretty much the same number of lines, right, for the actual exam. Because that just kind of gives you a sense of what you want to, the level of difficulty that you want to practice. Remember, do as much of the homework as you can as practice. When you run into those exercises where it just you're struggling and walking away and coming back isn't helping, set those exercises aside and move on to the practice that I've offered on Canvas, because that'll get you, drilling. In addition, I've given you a number of proof completion exercises in the additional practice. So work those, because it's really good warm-up. It's like stretching a little bit. All right, now, you don't see this on this screen, and I don't know why. It has something to do with the projector, but this is a screenshot of the proof that I made in Fitch, so you get sort of the line highlights, which will make it easier for you to see where you are in a given proof. But you're also welcome, if you want to, and this is more for the proof completion, proof construction, I think. You can always use lined paper if that helps you keep track of, keeping lines straight. We know from the board, right, that I don't do a good job with that. Okay, so let's talk strategy, right? Here is the completed proof in the sense that the actual inferences are drawn out, but your job is to cite and justify. So what I'm asking you to do here is first determine what strategy is used. Well, what does that mean? Look at what you're given. Your premise is a conjunction. There is no strategic rule for conjunction, right? There's a tactic. You eliminate a conjunction. Look at your conclusion. That's really where you want to look first all the time. Your conclusion is a biconditional. So when you want a biconditional, what do? Yeah, you make it, you create it, as Angel and Natalia are saying, you set up biconditional intro. So what does that look like? Well, let me do this real quick. Does anybody mind if I erase what's on the board? Okay, because it's about to go. Anybody? Bueller? Yeah, finally? Okay, good. Nobody was into it the last time, but I used to see the guy who played the teacher. He's actually, I think, an economist, or I used to see him around town where I grew up.
Is he actually that boring?
That's his, yeah. I think he may have highlighted it, but yeah, that's his.
He said he's an economist, right?
He's an I don't know what he is. He ended up doing. He taught, but then he did like.
So he's like
game
aware
shows.
that like people don't like his class.
I don't know, but I should try that. Line 1, anyone. Okay, so line 1, line 18. Let's note the setup, and remember, I used color coding. Some people may find it helpful, some not. You might use color coding, like highlighting when you're working. So here's the setup. I want a biconditional, so I'm setting up never fabulous in terms of symmetrical, right? I'm setting up biconditional intro. Okay, so that's the first thing you want to notice. Second thing you want to notice is that there are not only these two successive subproofs, there are two successive nested subproofs. So take a look at the second of the, or well, really the third, well, it's the second indentation. The first indentation is your structuring subproof. Your second indentation is your nested subproof. But look at the third line in. You've got 3 vertical lines. Look at the third line in. Look at line 6. Look at line 8. There are 2 rules that involve successive subproofs, right? One is biconditional intro. The other, as Connor says, is disjunction elim. Is that what this is?
Mm-hmm.
Why, yes, it is. So we're going to now say that we've got, let me get my other color pen, we're doing disjunction elim. Same thing, right? Disjunction elim. Okay, so notice that lines 1, 2, 3, 4, or sorry, rephrase, 1 and 2 assumptions, right? 4 and 7 assumptions, 10 and 12 assumptions. Once you start setting up your strategy and your sub-strategy, you've now filled in a fair amount of your proof, right? You know what you're going for. The question now is, what are the tactics that you're going to enlist, right? So again, I strongly encourage you to work the proof completion exercises, as many of those as possible, because those will give you they should give you a good sense of confidence. Connor, what are you thinking?
So just for the record, you
Yeah.
are being mean to me for using reiteration when you use it twice in that proof right there.
Oh, okay. I'm so glad you mentioned it. This is going to sound so snotty, and I kind of mean it this way. I have to.
Oh.
You did it like because you were insecure. It's your thing, right? You did it because you've got some sort of need. It's like, okay, you know how I have to flip, I told you I have to flip light switches on and off? That's my thing. Now, a friend of mine, when she locks her door, she has to lock it and then check it, and then check it, and then check it. She has to do that like 10 times before we can leave. I have to turn the light on, or turn it off after I turn it on, then turn it on again, turn it off again. I'm going to propose, Connor, that your need to reiterate when you don't have to is like that. It's a little bit compulsive. Okay, but why am I making such a big stink out of this? Because I want us to see the difference between not having to and having to. So Connor makes this great point. He's like, hey, you reiterated. Well, yeah. Remember, so let's start with the first reiteration. Q is an assumptive step. You can't end a proof on an assumptive step, right? You've got to end the proof with whatever it is that you're going for. So I'm saying here, look, if I'm assuming I have Q, then I'm saying I have Q. So that's the first reiteration, right? The second reiteration is the same thing. If I'm assuming I have P, then I'm saying I have P. On the other hand, if I use my assumption to either introduce a disjunction, right? Or I use my assumption to introduce a conjunction, or I use my assumption to eliminate a conditional, or I use my assumption to eliminate a biconditional, or I use my assumption to generate a contradiction, there's no need for me to reiterate it because I'm using it in connection with something else to get a line immediately after. That's why I'm calling you compulsive, which is totally inappropriate. Right, so logically there's nothing wrong with what you've done. Just know you don't have to, but know that you do have to here. Does that make some sense?
Yeah.
I'm delighted that you mentioned it, because I mean it's a really good point, right? Why'd you do it here when you made it, when you gave me guff for doing it in the other proof? All right, so what do you guys think? Line 3 is conjunction elim from line. Beautiful. Line 5.
Contradiction intro from 2 and 4.
2 and 4. Good. 6 is contradiction elim. From a contradiction, anything follows. What do I want? I want Q. Right? What happens next? And by the way, why do I want Q? Because remember, what I did here was simply fill in the structure. But why do I want Q? Well, remember that the end of the structuring subproof, the biconditional intro subproof, the first of the 2 successive subproofs conclusion is Q. So you want Q from each of your disjunction elims. Yeah? Then 11, once again, line. Oh, sorry, did I? Sorry, I skipped over.
Reiterate 8 from 7.
Yeah, 8 is a
9
reiteration.
disjunction elim.
Okay, so line 8 is reiteration from 7. 9 is disjunction elim from
3, 4 to 6, and 7 to 8.
beautiful. Okay, next. Now we're at line 11.
Conjunction elim.
Another conjunction elim, right, from 1. Are folks who have been feeling uncomfortable at least more comfortable with the idea that you're basically using this narrow set of rules over and over and over in different contexts? You're not going outside, right? No Martians are landing and mucking about with our system. So 11 is a conjunction elim from 1. 13, contradiction intro from 12 and 10. 14, contradiction elim. Notice we're mirroring, right? We're doing the same thing again and again in each of our successive subproofs. And then 16 we said is a reiteration. And what do we want in either case from line 11, 12 to 14, 15 to 16? We want P. So it's disjunction elim. And then 18 is biconditional intro. So look at what you've just done, and then go back one more time to these variously colored subproofs. Okay, what do we think? Awesome! I know. Just think, you guys, if our educational system were different, we could be doing this from like kindergarten. I know. Kind of makes you angry what you've been missing out on all these years, doesn't it? Does me. What are you thinking, Andrew?
Could you just say the numbers that you have to say for 18?
So 18 is biconditional intro from 2 through 9 and 10 through 17. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. What do we think? Natalia, what are we thinking?
It's not necessary to mention 1, right? I struggle with that. I'm always wanting to go back.
Oh, well, you do use 1. You use 1, you cite line 1 at line 3, and you cite line 1 again at line 11. Now, the fact is that line 3 and line 11 are within a subproof, so it gets cited implicitly in each of the sequences. Yeah. So you're exactly right. Just to reiterate, we will always use every premise that's given or derived until we get to our conclusion. But sometimes a premise is cited as part of a sequence, not on its own. But let me rephrase that: not on its own outside the sequence, right? But it also is cited within the sequence. What do we think? Yeah? Okay. Now, remember the 28-line proof and take a look at... Okay. So, all I did was, and you can do this too, guys, you can take arguments that you know are valid and open up an untitled window in fiction type them in and enter a goal, and Fitch will help you through. Okay, what I'd like us to do is to talk about our two strategies. Now, I suspect that given what Remton and Elizabeth have said, that they're thinking negation intro. Angel, you too? Yeah, negation intro. Go for it. Anybody thinking disjunction elim? Yeah, go for it. You disjunction elim folks, I don't want you to be intimidated by the fact that there are two disjunctions. Pick one. Pick one as your structuring subproof. In fact, let's do all three. Let's do disjunction elim with one as our originally structuring subproof, that was redundant. One as our structuring subproof, the other as our nested subproof, and then let's do one where we've got the negation intro. So let me erase this guy and remember our steps, right? And remember what we're talking about with when we talk about double nested, triple nested subproofs, so that the level of complexity, either a number of steps or nested subproofs. So line 1 says either not A or it's B. Line 2 says either it's not C or it's not B. 3 says A, and then the conclusion is not C. All right, and I think Connor proposed setting up disjunctional limb using 1 as the structure. So we've got not A, what do we want? Not C.
Can you make them bigger because you're going to have the 2 be a nested subproof in both of them?
Are we?
I think that's how it works.
Do we have to?
You already have a contradiction for the first one.
Yes.
And then
So that one.
for the second one.
But the second one you'll
Yeah,
have.
there you go. Okay. So you there are times when you can do that. The question would be, do you need to, right? So at line 4, I'm saying, okay, let me assume, I'm told that either A is not the case or B is. Well, let me assume that A is not the case. But wait a minute, I've been told that A is the case, so I've got a contradiction. And I'm trying to make sure that I generate as much room as possible so that I don't end up doing my usual mucking about with the clarity. Okay.
No, you mean B.
Oh yeah, I was wondering because I see this right there. That would be nice, wouldn't it? By the way, that just, don't ask me why, but I was reminded of the following. Some of you who will say, oh my gosh, reiteration feels like cheating, right? It feels like, wait, you're saying that something is true just because you say so? We all know that with very few exceptions, right, it's not the case that saying makes it so. In fact, we get annoyed when we get the because I said so response. Or, of course it's true, I said it is. I know that's not okay. But that's not what reiteration is. That's my short of the longer story. All right, so now, is it fair to say, so we've already used this guy, and we've just used A and not A, and then we use the contradiction to get out. Now, how many of you say, okay, I'm assuming the other side of the disjunction at B, I want not C, right? And oh, these two contradict each other, can't I just bring down not C? Well, remember, that move is typically allowed in other systems, rephrase. That move is allowed typically in other systems with the rule disjunctive syllogism. But remember, we proved that rule. Moreover, we know that we don't have the rule that says when you have a disjunction and the negation of one side, you pull down the other. Instead, what do you do when you have a disjunction? Disjunction elimination. So not C, and we want not C, right? And then not B, and we want not C, right? So that'll be, right. So now from 8 to 9 is reiteration, right? And then 10 gets you combined with 7A,
Contradiction.
from which,
Anything follows.
and so,
Disjunction elimination.
correct. And so,
Disjunction elimination again.
yes. Okay, let's work this together on the board in terms of citing and justifying. Sophia, what are you thinking?
I got kind of lost at 8, 9, and 10.
Okay.
8 and 9 is like just reiteration, but why?
Yeah. Okay. So how many do we want to cite and justify? 5 and 6, or are we good? You tell me.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So 5 is a contradiction intro, right? From 3 and 4. 6 is a contradiction elimination from 5. Okay. 7 and 8 are assumptions. 9. So Sophia is saying, hey, wait a minute. You're saying that line 9 is a reiteration of line 8, but why? Well, there are 2 ways to think about this, Sophia. One is that just from the standpoint, ignore everything else. This is an assumption, right? You have to discharge the assumption. You can't just stay here with the assumption. So the question is, what are you going to do after this assumption? Well, it depends on what you want and what you're given. It turns out that what you want is the very thing you're assuming you have. So you simply reiterate it. If I'm saying that I don't have C, then I'm saying I don't have C. And so that's what the reiteration is. Yeah? Yeah, okay. How about 11? Contradiction intro. What lines? 7 and 10. Line 12, contradiction elim from 11. And then 13 and 14, oh sorry, this was 18 left over. 13 and 14 are both disjunction elim.
But 13 is disjunction elimination from 2, 8, 9, and 10 through 12, right?
Yeah, sorry, I almost swallowed the cat here. Disjunction elim at line 13 is
Do we have to say
what,
2?
oh yeah, 2, 8 to 9, and 10 to 12. I'm sorry, Connor, what?
We do have to cite 2, right?
Oh yes,
And we'll have to cite 1 for 14?
yes.
Okay.
Why?
Because that's the disjunction we're eliminating, right?
Right. That's what we've set off. Yep. So 1, 4 to 4. Thank you. 4 to 6 and 7 to 13. I know you could do this all day, right? Okay. How's our confidence level? 14 lines. Easy peasy. Right? You're like, I've seen proofs harder than that. I've constructed and completed proofs harder than that. Okay, we ready? What happens if we set up line 2 as our structuring subproof? Disjunction elimination. What do you think? So let me do this. I'm not going to rewrite the premises, but what if I do this? So this will be not C, right? This is going to be not B, and we want what? Not C at each case, right? So you're probably saying, hey, Mia, you drew a vertical line way longer than needed, right? So let's do this, not C, and where we really need a little bit more room is under the not B part. Then what we're gonna do is further assume not A, and what do we want? Then assume B, what do we want, right? So let's say not C, so we can get out and say not C. Same thing, just swapping one disjunction elimination assumptive proof for another. Okay. And then lastly, now, this swap will take the same number of steps. For those of you who like negation intro, you'll actually have a little bit longer to go to get what you want, right? So you're assuming that your conclusion is false, generating a contradiction, getting out. You know that you still have to use your disjunction eliminations, right? So then the question is, well, how do you want to work this? Do you want to say, oh, I'll just start with line 2? But you could start with line 1. It doesn't matter. So line 2, contradiction, rephrase. You're going to need to get what you want here, contradiction elimination. Then your other side of the disjunction at line 2, and you're going to then need, a further, where is he? Here we go. Then you're going to need not A, contradiction, B, contradiction, which gets you back out, contradiction, from which you get not C. Now this might feel a little counterintuitive because now you're getting out, you're saying not C, and then another contradiction, right? But it's the only way to go. Let me see, hold on just a second. No, I'm wrong about that. Hold on to this. Do you mind if I erase? Do you want me? You're good, Elizabeth? Are you sure? Yeah. Do you take that if you need it, Miguel? But I'm actually, I think I spoke incorrectly. I did. I spoke incorrectly. So I was saying, okay, you're generating another not C. So let's do this instead. Yeah, there, that's better. So contradiction, 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 and then not C. So sorry about that. I wasted lines. Oh my goodness. Okay, so comfort level. I caught Natalia's expression out of the corner of my eye. You're okay with that, or what do you think?
Yes, my confusion was that last, the green contradiction,
Mm-hmm.
we could jump straight into not C since we have a contradiction that nested C, but anything could follow.
Yes, and we did do that, but then I said, well, wait a second, we don't need that extra step. If we just go for, so here's what I'm thinking. If we just go for contradiction, contradiction within the subproof sequence set off by 2, so disjunction elimination leads to a disjunction elimination. A disjunction elimination nested subproof leads to an elimination here. So in other words, you don't need to assert the elimination of the contradiction. It just is, it's an extra step that you don't need to take. Yeah? So here, so think about it this way. So 1, 2, and 3, right, are the same. So this is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And because I was not thinking as efficiently as I should have been, I said, oh, it'll take more steps, but it doesn't. So, yeah, there you go. Yeah? What are you thinking, Kevin?
Can you explain how you got 8 through 11 again?
Yeah, okay. So, 9 is a contradiction intro from 3 and 8.
Right.
10 is an assumption, right? 11 is a contradiction from 10 and 7, or 7 and 10, right? 12, now we're out. The disjunction at line 1 set off this subproof sequence that yields a disjunction elimination contradiction.
Repeat that again.
So here's the line where, what was it? Here's line 1, not A or B. Line 8 is not A, contradiction, right? Line 10 is B, contradiction. So in either case, whether I have not A or I have B, I have a contradiction.
Okay. It's a little better, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's if you're ready, let's move on to the next exercise and let's practice a little bit with pulling stuff off to the side. Okay. How are we doing? Isn't this great? Yeah. Don't forget, there's extra practice. I know. And if you finish that and you want more, there's more. Okay. Do you mind if I erase? I'm erasing. So, our last argument, again, is going to pose a question, right? So the idea here with each of these exercises is to have you say, okay, she wants to know what strategy I'm going to use, right? So what are you given? You're given a conditional, and a conditional, and your goal is a negation. What do you know you do when your goal is a negation? Negation intro. What do you do when you know your goal is a conditional? Conditional intro. What do you do when you know your goal is a biconditional? Biconditional, right? So you know what you set up. Now, why negation intro? Well, remember, conditionals are given in premises 1, 2, 3. So that means that you're going to have to dismantle, okay? So bear with me, because here's the pulling things off to the side idea employed. So line 1 says, if either A or B, then it's both C and D. Line 2 says, if it's B, then it's E. Line 3 says, if it's C, then it's not E. And again, the conclusion is a negation. This time it's not B. So you're probably thinking, once you've settled on your strategy, oh, I see some contradictions that are implicit. This is good news, right? All right, but the question's going to be, what do you want to do first? Well, take a look at lines 2 and 4. So I'm going to pull these off to the side. 2 says B, arrow E. 4 says B, so I have E, right? 2 says B, so I have A or B. So I have C and D. So I have C. So I have not E. Oh, hello, contradiction, which is just what I want. That was fast, I know, but what are we thinking, Kevin?
Well, for line 4, you have to use B.
if you, so, here's the well, are you asking, can't I assume, let's say C instead? Okay, sure, but you're going to, what you have to ask yourself is how you're going to pay back that assumption, right? What is assuming C going to get you? The nice thing about working backward from the conclusion is that you know what the assumption of B is going to get you. It's going to get you a contradiction. So it gives you more of a way forward than does saying, I'll just assume C. Because then you say, okay, I've now got not E, but now what do I do? How do I generate my contradiction? What are you thinking, Connor?
Why do you do B conditional E and then B again?
Oh, so this is line 1, this is line 4. I'm offering us
It's line
options.
2.
Wait, what?
She just re.
Oh,
restated
sorry,
the premise.
sorry, 2. 2 is the premise B arrow E.
Just to save time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah? And then A or B. Oh, well, come on, Mia. Nobody corrected me. Thanks, guys. Right? This is line 1, and this is, or no, this will end up being line, this could be line 5, potentially. These are just options. So I wasn't wrong you didn't need to correct
What do
me.
you mean line 6?
Well, this A or
wouldn't
B,
E
A-
be line 5?
A or B could be line 5, which would then yield C
I see,
conjunction.
I see.
So which do you want to do? It doesn't matter. You got options.
Well, we have to do them both to generate the contradiction.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter which order. In other words,
Oh, okay.
5 can be A or B, right? It's over here. 5 can be E. It doesn't matter which one you do first. It's up to you. Yeah? Okay, so what are you having? What do you want at number 5? A or B? So A or B, so that's 4, disjunction intro. Now I've generated my antecedent, so you can pull down C and D. You could also pull down E if you want. Again, the order of operations in terms of these tactics is not dictated. So you could say C conjunction D if you want. So that will be 1 and 5 conditionally lim. Now what?
Now we can do E.
You want to get E? Sure. E is going to be 2 and 4 conditional elim. And then C is 6 conjunction elim. And then not E is, where did it go? 3 and 8 conditional elim. Where's the contradiction?
7 and 9.
Yep, contradiction intro, 7 and 9. Therefore, it's not the case that B, so, I switched my order of writing the citations first. So we've got negation intro, 4 through 10. 11 lines. Compare 11 lines with,
48.
right? So do you see where the level at which I'm asking you to operate, right? So that should, I hope, reassure you that, and don't forget the answer key for this is available, right? I hope this reassures you that if you're struggling with those much harder exercises in chapter 8 and in chapter 6, right, that's going to pay off because by comparison this is considerably less complicated. Okay, now, before we leave the practice exam, I do want us to go back real quick to the Yeah, the conditional and biconditional. Let me offer a couple of ways of further thinking about these symbols. So these exercises are meant to be as basic as what you saw in exam 2, on exam 2 rather. What's going to happen is we want to have these basics in hand, because when we move into chapters 9 and 11, things get a bit more complicated, and there the translating process is going to be more complicated. So what we're going to do, we're getting our basics now, and then we're going to like backfill. So for example, you know, I think it was Connor had mentioned, hey, there's an chapter 7 exercise that was puzzling me. My vote is that you do what you need to do to you know, get as much homework done as possible, with an eye toward not just submitting it, but also practicing for this part. And then we can go in and backfill. Right? Okay, so here are some things that we said. So I'm just going to erase this real quick. All right, so we saw that we've got the following ways of thinking about the arrow. The left side of arrow is what comes after if. The right side of arrow is what comes after then. The left side of arrow is called the antecedent. The right side is called the consequent. We can think also that the left side of the arrow is always claimed to be, or is, the sufficient condition, and the right side of the arrow is claimed to be, or is. I say claimed to be because somebody could be wrong, right? The necessary condition. The one exception to this order is the phrase only if. And I love my little rhyme. Nobody else does. Only if represents a necessary condition. The necessary condition goes in the consequent position. This is a highlight of my thinking. Like, wow, this is great. And that's the reaction I usually get. Although some people are kinder, but then again, you're probably just getting yours back from how obnoxious I was earlier. Yeah. Okay. So only if represents or expresses, if you will, exclusivity. It expresses necessity. You can also think of the following. So if this is the case, then this other thing must be the case. There was something else I was thinking about, and I dropped my thread. Connor, what are you thinking?
That only if is different from if and only if, which is biconditional.
Yeah, so
right?
now, good. Okay, so if and only if is the biconditional. And remember, you know, if this, then that, and this, only if that, right? So we've got it's a two-way conditional. We also have a joint necessary and sufficient, or sufficient and necessary condition. And then there's also the phrase just in case, right? So that you have, you know, X, Y. So one of the ways that you want to, as Connor points out, one of the ways that you want to think about this is that the biconditional is built out of either two conditionals, if and only if, along with a conjunction. But it's also the case that you could get to it by way of, we talked about this earlier, conjunction, negation, disjunction, negation. Our textbook presents the word unless as an if-then. Very often it's presented as an or. I'll say for right now, you won't see that this time around, just because I want us to have the basics down. And we didn't get to spend a lot of time talking about this animal. So if remember we talked a bit about the truth table. The conditional claim is, for some, not a truth functional connective. There are reasons to argue that it is, but the approach that we took was to say, look, the truth values of the conditional mirror the requirements of a valid argument, right? So you can have, when you have true antecedent, true consequent, the claim is true, the conditional is true. True antecedent, false consequent, false claim, false conditional, right? That mirrors invalidity. And then false antecedent, true consequent, or false antecedent, false consequent, true conditional in each of those cases. So one of the things that we want to think about is why it is that we might say, and this is partly I think what's might be bugging you with some of the homework stuff, why it is that we might say that the conditional doesn't always pan out as a truth functional animal. So we can talk more about that. It's an interesting topic. Don't forget, I'm around all the rest of the week, the weekend, Monday. So if you have questions, problems, confusions, let me know. Don't be shy. There's Skype and there's email, right? There's our class discussion board. I'll make sure that that's available.